Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Really great to see you. It's so exciting to be in the Canada Pavilion at Expo. And I want to begin by thanking our host or hostess with the mostest, the Ambassador of Canada, Marcy Grossman, and my good friend. Really, thank you for having us. It's really special for you to be here. So I think we have a wonderful audience here. I hope, and Abu Dhabi students and staff members, you've had a good day today. Have you had a bit of a look at the Expo? That's the point. Not many days left. We're in the last 4 weeks, and it's been an amazing experience. And as you know, these Vice Chancellors Roundtables that I have, it's really so nice to do them in person, but this is the first one we've done at Expo. So this is very exciting. The first one we've done truly off-site. Yes, that's worth it, and applause. And I hope you've had a chance to see the pavilion as well, and we'll chat about that a little bit. But of course, the point of these roundtables is for us to meet with impressive leaders in all these different sectors that are so well represented in the UAE and that make the UAE such an exciting place, in fact, to live and to work. And for so many of you to come and study if you were not already from the UAE. And for those of you from the UAE who are here with us to learn more about the country and about the careers that you might want to entertain. So if you haven't, how many of you have attended a roundtable or seen one on Zoom before? Oh, a few of you know the drill. Very good. We're going to talk for about 45 minutes or so. We're going to see, we have time to let this go a bit. And what's so wonderful is now that we're not only doing it online, although this will also be available online, we can really interact more and have your questions and your comments and have a conversation. The ambassador is a wonderful conversationalist, I know that, and so you shouldn't be shy. As questions come up, we'll field them and we'll continue the conversation. But first we'll delve in a little bit, and since we're here at the pavilion, and it's been such an effort for the country to host Expo 2020 and get back in 2021 and 22 to the business of bringing people together, I really did want to start with that question and ask you, from your perspective as a diplomat, what Expo 2020 has meant in your view for the country, and also how you think about the Canada Pavilion and why and how it has mattered. Great.
Thank you, Mariette. Thank you for having me, Vice Chancellor. Thank you to all the students and faculty who have joined us today at the house that Canada built, our very proud Canada Pavilion. We'll get moving, and Mariette has a lot of interesting questions that I can't wait to dig into, but this is like an ask me anything kind of question. This is your opportunity, so keep your questions in mind. If we don't discuss them here, I would love to hear them afterwards. Nothing is out of bounds. But just to say, welcome to as I said, to the Canada Pavilion. Our thematic for this pavilion is the future in mind. Our working sort of philosophy is that we are leveraging our diversity as our strength. And as you know, Canada is a very, very diverse country in all ways, not just the people that live there, but the diverse geographies that we have, the diverse economy that we have. So leveraging diversity as our strength, coupling it with enabling technologies like AI, for example, and leaving the world in a better place. So you will see, as you saw in our public presentation, I hope that that's what that film told you about. It basically goes through the 4 seasons of Canada, and at the same time showing you all that Canada has to offer. So for a country to have a pavilion at Expo is an amazing opportunity to showcase your brand, and we think the Canada brand is pretty amazing. And the opportunity to do so at an Expo is not just about promoting it, for example, as a place to visit, but it's also to promote it as a place to do business. And this is a very much an economic expo. It's promoting as a place to go for education, to immigrate, to buy and sell things, to invest in. And so right now we're actually in our conference center, which is also called our Invest in Canada Lounge, because it's actually hosted by our Invest in Canada investment promotion agency. So that is the reason why countries come to Expo, and this Expo in particular is a very economic focused expo, and it's also one that focuses a lot on sustainability, which of course is another one of Canada's strengths.
That's a wonderful introduction to the great topic of Expo. And I wanted to start there not only because you're so thoughtful about it, but because normally you start this kind of thing by giving a proper biographical introduction. But I'd like for people to hear the voice of the person I'm talking about first. So we've done that now, and now I'm going to say a few things about Ambassador Grossman, just as we get into the question of how you become someone like her. If you can. Marcy Grossman is the current ambassador to Canada to the UAE. She's been that since 2019. And she's been in public service for the government of Canada for 31 years. She started when she was 10 years old. Her service has spanned 5 different government departments, which is quite unusual. And before she became ambassador in 2019, she was already the Consul General of Canada for Dubai in the Northern Emirates. This is quite typical, I think, for countries of a certain size to have a consul here and then an ambassador, but it is not so common to get snapped up immediately after being a consul, after about 1 year, to become ambassador. And before then, she really had been responsible for the creation of what is Canada's Foreign Direct Investment Agency. Very relevant to what you've just said. And that agency is called Invest in Canada. And it has enabled numerous multinational companies, big ones like Netflix, Google, Amazon, and MasterCard, to amplify their investments in Canada by billions of dollars. It's a massive contribution to the economy of Canada. Before she came to the UAE, she also served in the United States as Consul General and as Senior Trade Commissioner. You can imagine what a big trading partner Canada is for the US, a major, major role. And she supported a very wide range of Canada's business, political, academic, she cares about universities, consular, immigration, and public safety interests. That whole range tells you something about the versatility you need to have to be an effective diplomat. We'll talk about that. Marcy is also very highly regarded as a business development expert across these diverse economic sectors in major American and Middle East markets. And as you'll hear, she has a broad knowledge of geopolitical, security, and economic issues. And when she says that no question is off the table here, that's a really great invitation to ask questions, and you will see she will answer them exactly to the extent that she can. Just as I always say in my many conversations with students, openness is important. Let's begin with your journey, because when people see, and students especially, see an influential leader as you are, it's often very hard for them to imagine how you possibly got started on this beautiful 31-year journey I just told so briefly. Can you tell us how your career began and how it evolved?
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So I did not have a traditional start to my foreign service career. I actually, from a very early age, wanted to be a criminal psychologist. And actually, I have a master's degree in criminal psychology, and my first career was in federal corrections. So I'd like to say they let me into jail to do this job. And I actually went to a school in Ottawa that is very famous for its political science school, its international affairs school. But I did not take political science. Do you know why? I thought it was science. That's kind of way the young mind works at the age of 18 when you haven't really figured out your way around the world. So I said, well, I'm not taking that science thing, and I pursued the criminal psychology. But I always knew that I wanted to do something internationally. And Canada, particularly at the time, had really excelled in its correctional system based on rehabilitation, a lot of treatment programming, a lot of preparing offenders for their release, eventual release. And I always thought if I did something internationally, it would be in the area of expertise that I knew, which was corrections. But I couldn't translate that into an international assignment, and I really wanted to go on an international assignment. And it was actually on an executive training program. So basically it was a program that brought middle managers to the executive level, and you did that by doing a different year at a different federal department to get different management and leadership experiences. And at the end of the 5th year you would graduate, and in order to participate in that program you had to have a 5-year plan. So the 5th year of my plan was to do something international, but I couldn't figure out how to do that correctionally, and I ended up landing up in an organization called Investment Partnerships Canada, which is the precursor of Invest in Canada. And it was an organization that was co-managed at the time between Foreign Affairs and Industry Canada. And as soon as I got there and realized that I was part of the Foreign Affairs system and that I actually had an opportunity to pursue a career in Foreign Affairs, I was like, I am not going back to jail. And I managed to convert that 1-year assignment into a temporary assignment as the Senior Trade Commissioner in Dallas, Texas. And as I said, I wasn't going back to jail, so I managed to convert that into a foreign service career of over 21 years. I did 4 postings in the US, 2 here in the United Arab Emirates, so my expertise is really countries that start with the word United.
It's very fascinating, right? The criminal psychology career. I saw a lot of resonance in the audience as you mentioned that. And so if you think back to your university experience, is there a connection between the studies you took, other than the career path ones that you've indicated, you didn't want to go back to corrections? How do you think can you say that your university experience shaped how you are in the world, how you're doing the work you're doing today, or is it sort of a distant thing and you really took a new path?
Well, not always, but I had a goal to be something, and so I followed the educational path to get there. I wanted to be a criminal psychologist, so that happened, and then I spent my first 10 years as working in that field. So people think it's a big leap to get from criminal psychologist to foreign diplomat, but it's actually not that big of a leap if you break it down, because all of the work that we do as diplomats, not all, but the majority of the work that we do as diplomats is about relationships. So really understanding people, the way people think, because you're going to want to communicate something to them, negotiate something with them, build a relationship with them. So I find that psychology is really a building block to almost anything. So I think that's how that really helped me. And knowing a little bit about how the criminal mind works is a little bit helpful too.
I bet. Great stories there, I'm sure. Now we often also talk among us, as you all know here, about mentorship. We really care about mentoring. There's a lot of peer-to-peer mentoring at MO Abu Dhabi. There's also, of course, a lot of faculty or staff to student mentoring. It can have such a powerful influence, an informal or a formal mentor. Can you talk about a mentor or a person who had a significant impact on this somewhat unusual journey you took?
So I was asked that earlier today about role models, and the one thing I would say was it was difficult to find role models in the pursuits that I was following because they were very non-traditional for women. So working in a prison had not been at that time a commonplace for women, and our leadership was mostly not women. The same thing with the foreign affairs. In fact, right now we are at an amazing place where we have 50% of our ambassadors are all women, and we have a foreign service that really reflects Canadians, not just in gender diversity, but in a whole variety of diversity in terms of where they draw from. But when I started out, that wasn't the case. And during my lifetime, so 1970s, if you were in the foreign service, if you were a woman in the foreign service and you got married, you were not allowed to go on a posting. Because in the 1970s, it was thought that women can't do 2 things at the same time. So it didn't encourage a lot of women in the generation before me Now that, of course, has all changed. We have now parity in our ambassador level, and I find that that is very powerful, because the people that come after me have role models to draw from and have mentors to draw from. So I had a lot of mentors, I had a lot of allies, and but they were not women necessarily, so they didn't understand necessarily the uniqueness of my journey. But people in my organization that not just mentored me, and I would say was more sponsored me, like they had my back. They would not just help me navigate different situations, but they would actually put me at the forefront of a meeting or an engagement to really encourage me to step out of my comfort zone. So they didn't happen to be women, but that doesn't really matter. But I was just talking earlier about role models. But yeah, definitely having a mentor no matter what you do. And I always have a mentor. I always keep a mentor and a coach. A coach is someone who helps you build the skill set that you need to do your job, the leadership capacities that you need to do your job, and a mentor is someone that you can bounce ideas off of, that will guide you and help you navigate. So all through my career I've had both.
I think you've drawn such a beautiful distinction between the different roles that people who help you or inspire you can play in your lives. Role models are often sort of far out there, but they're important. You can see yourself in a role. And that's often someone who, by identity, you relate to. It could be gender, it could be ethnicity, it could be whatever kind of background, religion. They've achieved something. They don't necessarily become your mentors because you might not even know them, as a matter of fact. So I think that's a very important point that you make, and obviously you saw a change in the course of your diplomatic career. And then you have, as you've said, you have mentors who can help you really bounce and think and be really a sounding board, and that's a longer term relationship typically. But you also spoke importantly to sponsors and allies. I think allies are so important, and they often are precisely not from the sort of general identity horizon that you might be coming from. So these are interesting concepts, I think, to use, and I certainly agree that it's never just about one mentor forever. Mentors also change, right, in the course of your life. I really love the way you've talked about this. I'm going to ask you to think back to this day in the fall of 2019 when you and I first met, which was the day that you presented your credentials as ambassador of Canada to the UAE. And it was kind of a busy and amazing day. Tell us about that day.
Actually, it was a 24-hour period, and I arrived in Abu Dhabi on, let's say it was November 24th, something to that effect. And the first thing you do when you arrive is you present credentials. So I went to Qasr Al Watan, and I came face to face with Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, who is in fact the most senior diplomat in the UAE. And I stood right in front of him, like in ruler's court, basically, and a whole line of ministers on one side and 5 or 6 other colleagues on the other side, and had to memorize this phraseology that included presenting myself as ambassador, extraordinary, and plenipotentiary. Try to say that when you're nervous, right? So you present basically the letter that the Governor General of Canada has given to you. The Queen has given the Governor General to give to you, to give to Sheikh Mohammed, and it was just such an incredible moment. It was actually the next morning that I came here to the site and did the groundbreaking for the Canada Pavilion, which I can talk about a little bit more. It was not my first encounter with this pavilion. Then booked it back to Abu Dhabi, got on a bus to the Sea Palace with a number of John Sexton, led by John Sexton, their Chancellor, a number of folks from NYU with a golden Torah, golden Hebrew scrolls, and went to present them to Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. And Sheikh Nahyan was there, and Khaldun al-Mubarak was there, and they actually finished the scroll, and the scroll was from the Jewish community, and it was dedicated to Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in honor of the late Sheikh Zayed. And it was just an incredible. This is pre-Abraham Accords. This is before the Pope came. This is
No, the Pope had been.
the Pope had
came
been.
in
Okay, it was
February.
January.
Yeah.
Okay, February. Right.
Yeah.
So just after the
Yeah.
Pope came, but it was before so many other things happened, and that's where we met. And then we had a Torah after party at the official residence of Canada, which was my first event, and so it wasn't bad for a first day.
So I looked at this ambassador, I said, wow. Not only did she do all of those things, then she hosted us at her own house. It really is something. And remember, you just heard that people thought women couldn't do two things at once, or as they say in America, walk and chew gum at the same time. And you obviously are able to do it. So that's amazing. And you are also Canada's first Jewish ambassador and female ambassador, I think, to the UAE. And you've been a very strong advocate of gender equity, diversity, and tolerance. Tell us a little bit about what your experience has been. Of course, COVID has gotten in the way, but the country has kept going. The Canadian embassy has kept going. What are you hopeful for on these fronts of equality and equity for the region?
Well, first to say, and I don't know about you guys, if you're not from the UAE, but I definitely did not know what was going on here until I got here. I had a bunch of stereotypes and expectations that really were not accurate, and I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was pretty bold for my government to send a female Jewish leader to an Arab country, and I thought it was even more bold for the host government to accept me, and I just want to say that I was warmly accepted just from the get-go. And I was so also pleasantly surprised by the female leadership in this country. There are 7 female UAE ministers. As we know, the Mars Hope probe, the whole operation was run by a woman. 80% of the women on the engineering team, 80% of the people on the engineering team were women. And it goes back really to founding father Sheikh Zayed. When you read what his vision was for the UAE, it always included a very powerful role for women. So I have to say that I was very pleasantly surprised by what I saw and very accepted. And I started out when I was in Dubai in 2018, which was very much pre-Pope, pre-Abraham Accords, not really leading with my religious faith. And I'm not a very religious Jew. I'm more of a secular Jew. I believe in more of the cultural aspects. I'm called a JFK Jew, just for kiddish. I just come for the food. But so I don't lead with my religion, but I have to say I went from being like least popular ambassador to most popular ambassador almost overnight, because people really wanted to know about what it was like. First of all, what was going on in the UAE, and what was the Jewish experience like, and what was the Jewish female experience like. So it's been incredible. I'm just so honored that everything has transpired the way it has.
The Abraham Accords were signed about 9 months after you gave those credentials, I think. What difference has that made, I think, to your tenure here? Can you comment on that, or was there not really a notable effect?
No, well, it started out where I didn't tell anyone I was Jewish, and I actually hid it. So the day that I presented my credentials in Dubai was much less of a formality, because it's not in the capital. But in my package, I didn't actually look in the package of the credentials, but my home department had put some kinds of biographical information that I would not normally share with people. And one of the pieces of information was that I spoke Hebrew. And I was really nervous, as I said. I didn't know to the day I presented the paperwork in Dubai, I thought they'd figure out I was Jewish and they'd just want me to go home, like, you're in the wrong place. So after I delivered the paperwork to the director of the MFA, I was like, phew, I made it. Like, they can't send me back now. And just as I'm walking down the hallway, he goes, "Hey, you speak Hebrew?" And I'm like, "No, but I'd like to speak Arabic." "Well, I kind of speak Hebrew, but I don't really know. I gotta go. Bye." Like, It just was so strange. So I didn't lead with those things, and I thought I was very afraid. But I would say that since the Abraham Accord, it's really given freedom to just be me, be female, be Canadian, be Jewish, and the amount of Jewish life that has been built here has been exponential. We went from one synagogue, it wasn't really a synagogue, it was in a villa, so we called it the villa, so one small underground villa that wasn't even like known to the public, it didn't even have like a sign on it, to having like 6 Jewish communities in Dubai, a couple in Abu Dhabi, and of course, your amazing neighbor, the Abrahamic family house, the mosque, the church, and the synagogue, all on the same campus. So since the Abraham Accord is just given light and given freedom, not just to myself, but to many other people to express their diversity. And I think the next giant step is going to be when that site opens up. I think it's going to be a true beacon of tolerance and peace to the world, and I think the synagogue is going to play an important role as well as the other faith communities. And see, we have a lot of Catholics in the room today, so wishing everyone, I don't think you wish people a happy Ash Wednesday, it's not a happy day, but acknowledging Ash Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. It is a very important holiday at the end of Carnival, beginning of the Lent period. So obviously, not intentionally, you ended up playing, as you do today, an important role as a gatherer of the Jewish community, but also, as I've seen you often work, bringing together Jewish people, Christian people, secular people, Muslim people, Emirati people, people from around the world. And that, of course, is also part of your role as Canadian ambassador. So I want to turn now to Public and Foreign Service and what it means to you. So most people, and certainly everyone here, knows that an ambassador is the highest ranking representative of a country or an international organization abroad. And you're therefore key as ambassadors to maintaining diplomatic relations with the host country, which doesn't just mean being nice, although politeness is good. Not many people know, I count myself among them, precisely how that is done, or what kind of work you do to achieve maintaining those relationships and achieving certain goals for your country. Would you talk a little bit about that? Maybe share some examples of initiatives, projects, or negotiations that you lead to achieve particular goals. You can be as specific or unspecific as you wish to be.
It's an interesting day because today was a very typical day in the life of an ambassador. So I will talk a little bit about just what I've done today and what I will do for the end of the day. But so the beauty of everything that's happened here and happening here in the UAE is it just aligns so well with Canada's priorities here. So one of our main priorities is bilateral trade. And we actually enjoy a very robust bilateral trade relationship of about $2 billion a year. One of our main roles is to help Canadian companies get their products and services into the market. That includes educational services. So Mabel in the back here is one of our trade commissioners, and that's what she does to help Canadian universities present what they have to offer and also to build partnerships between universities. Canada also has some interesting foreign policy objectives that align very nicely with the UAE. And I don't know if you know that Canada has a feminist foreign policy. Some people are nodding. We copied Sweden. It's been about 7 or 8 years since we've had a feminist foreign policy. I'll be honest, when I first heard about it, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But it actually makes a lot of sense. So it's providing a gender lens on everything that we do internationally. So when we give out aid money, how does it impact women? When we negotiate trade agreements, what are the impacts on women? And also, we don't even just look at the gender lens, we look at the whole diversity lens on anything that we negotiate. And one of the main pillars of that foreign policy, feminist foreign policy, is an initiative called Women, Peace and Security. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's a UN initiative. It's about 20 years old. And basically the premise of it is that women are natural peacemakers, peacekeepers, and peace builders. And the more women you can get into those processes, bring them to the table to discuss important issues, the more peace you will have. So we're very much aligned in that, and that's something I'm really excited about continuing to work on with the UAE, who has WPS National Action Plan, who has a Women's Military Academy. So that's one of the things. But just to give you a sense, and to go back to the diplomacy, so a lot of times you're asked by your headquarters to do a démarche, and I had to go and do a démarche this morning, which is not always easy. And as you all know, with the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, Canada and the West have taken a very active role at the United Nations, and they've been convening the General Assembly, which they've only convened exceptionally, other than UNGA Week, only 11 times exceptionally since the inception of the United Nations, to discuss the issue and to try to prevent and stop what is going on. And not all, and we have a lot of support for that. As of this morning, we had 108 countries who signed on and agreed to it, and the vote is going to be this afternoon. And so our démarche was to go out, everyone around the world, to go out to host government and try to get them to say yes, to vote in favor of this. And not all countries are in favor of it. They have different geopolitical realities. They have to walk in their own shoes, and they do make decisions based on the well-being of their own country, first and foremost. And so I had to go in today and try to convince the host government of my position, or our position, Canada's position. So not easy at all. From there, I went home, and a media team from the Kalish Times was there for filming a series of interviews for International Women's Day, which is my happiest day of the year.
Is it March 8th?
March the 8th, next week. So yeah, did the face, the hair, the thing, the filming.
You look great.
Thank you. Ate lunch in the car on the way here, because I was already 10 minutes late. Did my bilateral calls with my staff. So every week I meet with my senior managers to make sure that they know what they're doing, I know what they're doing, and we're just on the verge of having, like we're calling it March Madness, a visit of the Governor General, the Minister of Trade, every single business organization. Everyone is like, now that the COVID rules have changed, like people are booking flights like crazy. So always checking in on what my staff are doing. That's, as a manager and a leader, that's really important. Came here to speak to an audience to talk about how amazing Canada is and why you need to get more Canada in your life. Build a partnership with an amazing, not just amazing Vice Chancellor, but an incredible international brand, NYU, to see how we can build some partnerships between NYU and some of our premier Canadian institutions. And as you know, McGill is in town starting today, and they're having their 200th anniversary. Yeah. So they're doing a big tour around here. So building those partnerships, and then I'll get back in the car and I will skedaddle back to Abu Dhabi, where you and I are both invited to the grand opening of the American Jewish Committee's headquarters, and a dinner with their CEO, David Harrison, who's a very popular guy. Day in a life.
There's never a dull moment. That is a wonderful narration. Now you've heard about 2 of her days.
Yeah.
This is a highly energetic ambassador and woman. I want to thank you for describing, the hard parts, the good parts, the easy parts, the just plainly enjoyable parts in the work you do. I think your description of the démarche will really stay with this group. I think What the lesson I take from what you've just said is something that we all know, but is really hard to do in daily life, in whatever work or a community circumstances you're in, which is that sometimes, especially as a leader, and you're the leader of the Canadian mission here, you have to be able to speak clearly to a partner, to representatives of the government in this case, to partners who are important to you. You may have to say things on which you already know in advance that there will be some divergence of opinion, maybe even fundamental disagreement that basically can't be transcended because you're representing your countries and not necessarily only your own views. Always you have to set those aside. Ideally there's a lot of alignment, and with you get a strong sense of a lot of alignment. But sometimes in any job, in any leadership job, sometimes you have to do this. And you have to then be able to walk out of the room about 45 minutes to an hour later, sometimes it's longer I would imagine, and still preserve the relationship. Because the next week there may be a totally different topic on which you're completely agreed. This is a very common human experience, especially for leaders, but really in life. And so I'm really grateful to you for sharing it. Would you say that, how often do you encounter, or how common is it to find yourself having to sort of fight impulses to let one's personality overtake the representation of the organization, or in your case, the country you represent? How hard is that for you?
It's really hard because I have no filter.
No filter for an ambassador is not so good.
It's not good. And in fact, I did the démarche, but the other reason I was there this morning was actually to talk about something that we are very mutually aligned on, which is the Afghan refugee crisis. And as you may know, the UAE has, in their Emirates humanitarian city, opened the doors to Afghan refugees, and many of them are destined for Canada. And so we had an opportunity to talk about, just partnering to support that cause. And I was given instructions of what I could say and what I could promise and what I couldn't promise. But I could tell that the conversation was not going in the right direction. I was actually surprised by some of the updates that I got, that I went off script and overcommitted. And but I felt like it was the only way to save the conversation. So it is what it is, and hopefully I didn't leave that much of a mess behind me. But sometimes you have to just trust your gut and gauge the room and just do what you think is necessary, even if it's not in the script. So,
yes, I don't really believe in staying too closely on script myself. Authenticity is really important, yes. And I think for building trust. Yes. Because people, of course, anyone would understand that an ambassador sometimes just has to say what has to be said, but if it's not a crucial issue that really will break the relationship, you also still have to be a human being.
Right.
Can you be a human being as a diplomat?
Well, you can, and I think I've tried to prove that, because as I said, it's not that I don't have a filter, it's just that I am who I am, and I can't lie, actually. If I don't agree with something, you pretty well know. Like, I'll deliver the points, but you know my heart's not in it. And I use humor, which is not always good, especially when you're in different cultures. Not everyone understands your humor, but it's part of my authenticity. So if you don't like it, then I don't mean to offend anyone, and I hope I haven't offended anyone in this room, but you don't like my way I roll, so that's fine. But I find as you get older, you can get more authentic, because I have this new line that I keep saying, and someone says, well, you can't do that because, headquarters is going to do this, and I just go, what are they going to do? Take away my birthday? Like, they can't take away my birthday, so.
They can't take away your birthday. Well, I think, and there's, it's wonderfully said, and I think there are probably even some complications that may have arisen. Certainly this is true for a global enterprise like NYU, for example. The relationship between our headquarters, which ultimately is NYU New York, but of course we are so strong and large here now, and Shanghai is like that there is a certain attenuation over time in those relationships, which you can't really afford in a diplomatic network. Along comes the pandemic, and a lot of the travel that we've known becomes impossible. Can you tell us a little about the effects of COVID-19 on your work as a diplomat, and whether you anticipate any long-term changes to the role of ambassadors in diplomacy after we sort of come out of the end of this?
3 things. I'm going to try to remember them. The first is, I've already forgot them. The first is that, half the job of a diplomat is paperwork. Management, leadership, and filling out forms and filing paperwork, which you can do from home. So that's the first thing, is all of our meetings used to be in person with the staff, with the bilats. Now we do them on the phone, we do them on whatever virtual platform we have available to us. So you still have to do that, and you're still perfectly able to do that. The second thing is that, and I heard a lot of ambassadors say this at the beginning, how am I going to do my job if I can't go out and see people? And I have to say that there's a lot of activities that you can't do when you can't go out and see people. So you can't go to large events, you can't go to national days, you can't go to iftars, you can't go to those kind of things. But your job really is, you're able to do your job because you're able to connect with people in other means. Now I would say, however, and I noticed this today in particular, because now that we don't have to wear the masks outside, there's like this new freedom that seeing people again and seeing the smiles on their faces and reading the body languages and being able to have like a hallway conversation with people outside really does make a difference. But I would say that I was really able to do my job to the extent that I needed to. And the last point I wanted to make, and we talked about that today, this morning at Mosaic. We've been talking about the 21st century embassy for a long time. We were talking about it, 10 years ago. But we've actually started the 21st century embassy now. It's allowing employees to have the flexibility to work the hours they need to work, from where they need to work to the extent possible. It's about finding different ways to connect, not always having to get on an airplane to go and travel with people. That now we've made the virtual platform normal, so we can use that platform. And we've done Twitter diplomacy, we've done virtual signings of agreements. So we're already way ahead of where we thought the virtual embassy would be. And a lot of countries are thinking about how they can have a more 21st century virtual embassy, because it's really expensive to run an embassy. It's a lot of people, and it's very expensive. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more evolution in that area.
I was curious, actually, thinking of your day-to-day activities and responsibilities, so much of which is paperwork or now digital work, I imagine that you do. How large is your team? You're also, as a head of mission, you're also an ambassador, you're a head of mission who comes in and inherits a staff. Can you talk a little bit about how long one is in a particular post and what it's like to move really, and just, you're basically not entirely choosing your own team, so there's a lot of management. How many people do you manage, and what is that like, that working with that core of people that is already there when you come? How do you rely on them? How do you work with them?
So we have a nice sized mission. It's 100 in the embassy. About half of that is dedicated to our immigration program. Canada continues to be a very coveted destination for migration, whether it's just tourism or permanent residency. We have a consular section. That is the group that helps Canadians who are in distress, traveling through the region in need. You lose your passport, you come in contact with the law, you call the consulate, the consular officials. We have the trade, innovation and education program that I mentioned that Mabel is part of. And we also have, we have a large group that supports the care and feeding of the 100 people. So the leases for the houses, the office, etc. One of the things I'm most proud of is the day I walked into the Abu Dhabi embassy, I was actually quite shocked to see that the place had gone into great disrepair. And partially that was because the immigration section was enlarging and growing so quickly, and we just didn't have the space. And the first thing I said to people when I got there was, my commitment to you is by the end of my tenure in 3 years, because it's a 3-year term, that I'm going to bring this building up to the standard of excellence of the people that work here. And I'm very proud because even during COVID, we managed to do huge, large-scale renovations. We just did all of our artwork over, and we're stealing some of the pieces from here actually, as soon as they close up shop here in a couple weeks. All new workspaces, a very flexible way of working now around teleworking. And so I'm really very proud of that, which is why I want to mention it. But the thing you have to know that when you get to a new organization is you really have to take the pulse of the people. And that was a bit of a challenge for me because I only got here in late November 2019, and by February we were already sequestered in our homes. So, but I've used, all through COVID, I did coffee Wednesdays with all the staff. And it was great actually because it did allow everyone to join in no matter where they were. And in an embassy, you can't always do that. So I really had to try to keep in touch with the people. And it was, I think, a lot harder to move forward a vision per se, but that's mostly because we had our hands full with just emergency response for a good part of the time. But it worked out quite well, right, Mabel? Yeah. We have our beautiful embassy. We did do strategic planning. I don't even know how I got the leaders to do that. We did a whole visioning exercise, mission statement, etc. We managed to do leadership training for everyone. We did mental health training for 2 years. So we really did have an opportunity to set direction and help people move towards it, despite the impact of the pandemic on people and the workload. Like, we're responsible for all the Afghan refugees now, and Canada is taking 40,000 of them. So the work never stopped. So.
Well, that's a very beautiful answer about the work during the pandemic. You clearly kept going. You have to keep going, and we did too. And it was amusing to hear you say strategy. We did academic strategy planning. We did a lot of work on mental health, didn't we? Making that more available to people, leadership training around that, and other things. It's interesting to see these equivalents. We've all found ways to do it, even though we're all awfully happy to be back in person. Before we go to questions, I wanted to ask a little bit about your work with Canada's foreign direct investments, which of course a lot of the work you did before you became consul here. And as you've said, this is an economic expo. UAE is an important trading partner. The region's important. Can you help us understand the role that investments play in international relations? Isn't that private? Why would you get involved in that as a public servant?
Well, it's a perfect question to actually bring a lot of things together. So, as I said, I started my career at Investment Partnerships Canada. I literally fell into that job because I couldn't find another one. I realized I was in the Foreign Service. I was like, yes, okay. I went to Dallas, Texas, and the way I got to Dallas was there was a 2-week temporary duty that they were looking for someone to do because there was no investment officer in Dallas. The person had left suddenly, and the Prime Minister was coming to town, Prime Minister Chrétien at the time, and they needed someone to set up the investment roundtable. And they're like, who can go on a moment's notice? I'm like, I can. And they're like, you are not even from here, like, what do you know? And I'm like, I'm better than no one. And they're like, okay, get on a plane. I got there to Dallas, I got on the ground, and okay, I'm an investment roundtable, like, what is that? I had no idea. I started cold calling CEOs' offices, and I got like Michael Dell on the phone, and all these, when you say come meet the Prime Minister, people actually do come out. So I worked on that for 2 weeks. It was a very successful prime ministerial visit. We had the investment roundtable. And at the end of that, I said to the Consul General at the time, I said, I know that your investment officer is not here, that you're not going to get anyone till the summer, because this was in December, and in Canada, the rotation happens in the summer. I said, I think I did a pretty good job. I got Michael Dell out, like some good conversations. I said, I'd like to fill that position for you. And he's like, You've been here for 2 weeks, like you just got here, nobody knows anything about you. And I said, yeah, but you can't get anyone till the summer. So literally, I'm better than no one. So he's like, okay. So by February of 2020, gosh, what year was it? February of that same year, so this was December. By February, I had sold everything I had, packed up my kids and my husband, and I was living in Dallas, Texas. And I called up, actually, I think he called me up. Michael Dell's office called me up, and they're like, yeah, you're the one who hosted this investment roundtable. We're actually interested in investing in Canada. I was like, great, because I'm the investment officer. I've never done a pitch in my life, right? Okay, I'll just fast forward the whole thing. Anyhow, had a great success, brought Dell to Canada in a very significant way, went on to do some other FDI, decided this was my love. I loved selling Canada. I loved the Canada brand. Fast forward 20 years, I come back from posting in the United States and I don't have a job. And I'm like, what am I going to do here? The phone rings and it's a guy who is starting the new Invest in Canada agency, spinning the old department out of government. Do I want to be involved? I was like, yes, I love building things. I love investment. So I spent from 2016 to 2018 in Ottawa without a job, building the beautiful Invest in Canada, and that's my logo. I'm pretty proud of it. That's my logo. Building that agency, spinning it out. 2018, I'm supposed to go to Dubai. I know I'm supposed to go to Dubai. I'm waiting for my paperwork to come, and I'm going to go to Arabic training because I want to learn Arabic, and I also have to upgrade my French skills. And I'm walking down the hallway, and I see my future boss, and she's like, oh, you're Marcy Grossman, I've heard a lot about you. You're going to Dubai? I said, yeah. She goes, I have a very important project for you to do this summer before you leave, and it's impossible, and no one else wants to do it, and you have to do it. And I was like, thank you so much for the faith in me. I'm going to French training tomorrow. I'm going to Arabic training after that. She's like, listen, if you do this job, I'll send you to Nice for French training. I'm like, okay, you have my attention now. I said, what is it? This is summer of 2018. She says, we don't have a mandate for Expo. We need someone to go and find many millions of dollars to build, create a vision and build a pavilion. Can you do it? I'm like, I guess so. So I spent the summer doing that when I didn't go to Arabic training or French training and never got to Nice. And by the time I got to Dubai, I was ready to sign the agreement with Reem Al Hashmi to come to Expo. So coincidentally, if you believe in coincidences, the primary sponsor, and this has nothing to do with me, of this pavilion is Invest in Canada, the agency I launched in 2018, in the building that I helped get the mandate for also in 2018. So basically, my entire career is in this room with you guys right now. So.
That's a wonderful wrap-up indeed. That brings so much together, but it is a huge part of diplomatic life, is supporting the economic fortunes of the country you represent. And I think when prime ministers come, as you say, typically you see a trail of business leaders and investment pitchers behind them, coming with them to open those doors, which is so important.
And just so, to say, just quickly, because I didn't, the importance of foreign direct investment, or FDI, to a country is it brings capital and creates opportunities, economic opportunities, and it creates wealth, and it creates jobs, and it contributes to education. And it's a great source of not just economic but social benefits to the country. And in terms of Canada's value proposition, we are the least expensive country in the G7 to do business. We're a much easier place to do business in the United States. We have the most educated workforce in the world. 65% of all Canadians graduated from post-secondary institution. We have a very loyal workforce. People are very committed. They're very diverse. 60% of Canadians, almost in the city of Toronto, our largest city, were born somewhere else. We have diversity of language, culture, ethnicity, everything. And we have amazing educational institutions, and it's a great place to invest.
You heard it from the woman who thought that she didn't know how to pitch. Nor was she trained for it in university in that way, although she went to a really fine university and learned to communicate and all those other things. We could keep talking forever, but I think let's go to some questions, please. And state your name when you.
And I think we need a microphone.
And maybe even the country.
Oh, we have a mic stand here. Right.
Yeah, you can come up there and speak, and maybe even say, if you want to, where you're from or where you would consider yourself to be from.
Okay.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hello. My name is Lara Moka. I'm a student, of course, at Abu Dhabi. I am from Venezuela.
Nice.
And I'm a freshman, but if this serves as a background, I'm also a gender equality activist at UN Women. So this has been very enlightening. I guess my question is kind of a personal one, because as you may know, the feminist movements right now is intersectional, right? So this includes that if you're a feminist, you advocate for different causes. So I guess my question would be how you as a diplomat, as a feminist, but also as a Jewish, deal with differences between all of this. Maybe as a diplomat, there's something that you have to advocate for, but you really don't believe in. Or maybe there are differences in your religion and in being a feminist that you also have to deal with. So I guess my question is, how do you approach this?
So just from thank you for your question. So as a broad platform, the government has given us the feminist foreign policy. And as I said, you can't get money actually in the Canadian government unless you look at it through an intersectional lens. So if you have a great idea for a project like building a pavilion, you have to tell the government how it's going to benefit different ethnicities, different genders, different sexual orientations. So you have to cover the entire spectrum of diversity in order to secure funding, in order to build anything. So, and any policy that is created in Canada also has to be looked at through this lens. So any health policy, any domestic economic policy always has to be looked at through this lens. So I guess the answer to the question, and the other thing that we excel in, and that one of the things we're trying to actually share here with the UAE, is we do a gender-based analysis plus on everything that we do, this lens that we look through. And so we're trying to work, for example, with the Gender Balance Council here for them to have training in that so that they too will understand how to apply that to both domestic and international policy. So that's the framework in which I operate. And again, Canada is diverse. Our diversity is our strength. Like, that's not debatable, I don't think. And we lead with some things, depending on where we are in the world. And so we have to sort of, gauge our stakeholders to see what we'd lead with. But in the end, we don't sacrifice our beliefs. We maybe don't shout them all from the rooftops at the same time. But it's who we are as a country, and that's part of one of the most important parts of our brand, and that's like non-negotiable. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Please, front. I'm gonna go da 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 da.
Yeah.
Okay, see how we do.
Yeah. So just if you have a
So I
question
see
and you
you.
get up, just jump up.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, my name is Addie Mae Vias. I'm actually from Austin, Texas.
Woohoo!
So howdy.
Howdy. How y'all?
Yeah. So as someone who's aspiring to join the U.S. Foreign Service, this has been extremely enlightening. And with that, I was wondering if you could go back and tell yourself when you're first starting out in the Foreign Service a lesson or a skill that you've learned now that you think would help you in your career. If you were to go back, what would that be?
It's a great question, and Marriott had that question. I always thought that to join the Foreign Service, you had to be very, very, very smart about geopolitics in the world. And as a person who didn't take political science because I thought it was science, I also didn't think I was smart enough to take the Foreign Service exam. I went to school in the nation's capital. Every single person who graduated from university when I did took the Foreign Service exam. I didn't take it because I didn't think I was going to pass. The thing is, it actually then, and even less now, has nothing to do with how smart you are book-wise. It's actually a competency exam. It's to look at the different skills that you have and that you bring to bear. And so I would say, if you even, and to get into the Foreign Service now, you need a bachelor's degree, but it could be a bachelor's degree in anything. So I would say that there's a skill set that actually makes or breaks a Foreign Service officer. It's not how smart you are. I am never the book smartiest person in the room, not never. But if you want someone to zig and zag, I'm your woman. So what does that mean? It means I can communicate, I can action, I can lead, I can manage. I am resilient. Listen, if I wasn't resilient, and if we weren't all resilient, like we wouldn't be sitting here right now. The last 2 years have been like living hell. You have to be resilient. You have to like people. Here's one myth for you all. I'm an introvert. So I actually have to I emerge in the morning and I have to say a mantra to get myself out of bed in the morning. And then I go out and then I just slay it all day. But then I go home and I just lock myself in a room to decompress. So a lot of people think that if you want to be a diplomat, you have to be an extrovert. That is not true. I am not an extrovert. I can play an extrovert when needed, but you don't need to be an extrovert. So it's around that skill set. I think that's really important, and that's what they're testing on, and that's what they're looking for. And if your skill set aligns with what your Foreign Service is doing, and they're hiring for every stream, right? It's not just the foreign affairs stream, it's the trade stream, it's the management stream, it's the security stream. There's something in that for everyone. So just really what your passion is, and align it with your passion. Because if it's not your passion, you're never going to get out of bed in the morning. Like I was lucky, I got to start in an area that I was really passionate about, and got to pursue that in my career. So
Thank you.
thank you.
You may be an introvert, but you're a pretty good actor.
I am.
At not being an introvert. Please.
All right. Hi, my name is Sultan Farouk. I'm a UAE national. I'm a freshman at NYU Abu Dhabi. Thank you so much for all your answers, both of you, and your question. Thank you very much. Very insightful. And pretty much, I hope you don't mind if I ask you a question about FDI.
Yeah, I love
fine.
it.
All right. So
I know those answers.
Growing up in Dubai, I was surrounded by a lot of businesses and trade, like from my grandfathers and my parents growing up. And so a while ago in class, actually, I was asked to write a paper on the evolution of trade and business in the UAE. And so immediately I started thinking about the 2016 amendment to foreign investment in the UAE, right, where it effectively makes FDI more accessible and easier to happen in the UAE. So I think I read somewhere that the UAE is responsible for 0.44% of the FDI in Canada. And so my question is that throughout COVID-19, the entire pandemic, how has this affected the FDI relationship between Canada and the UAE? And can we expect after Expo 2020 more representation of different types of businesses in both countries?
Great question. Lots of questions in there.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Actually, good point. So UAE is one of the larger sources of FDI into Canada, and we actually have an investment program here, and that's why Invest in Canada decided to sponsor, so that you can go and look at their messages. I hope I reflected them properly here, and we really wanted to showcase that brand to the world. So that's why Expo was really important. I can't remember the question now.
So it's fine, no worries. It's my fault. Pretty much, how was since the amendment?
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah.
So actually FDI flows actually went through the roof in 2020 because business has continued. And here's the great thing about Canada. Our brand is not we're the flashiest country in the world. Like, we don't do that. If we told you that, you'd say we were lying. But our brand is actually, we're very reliable, friendly. And during a pandemic, reliable really sells. And the way that our country addressed COVID was in a very reliable, friendly, whatever way. So actually FDI is actually doing really, really well. And I would imagine increased flows. Now, from a diplomatic point of view, why I wanted to have this pavilion here is because I want it to be looked upon favorably by the UAE, so that when they're investing their hard-earned FDI dollars, they're going to think of their friendly friend in Canada to do it. So part of our day-to-day work is cultivating the relationships with primarily the sovereign wealth funds, actually. And you know, we know that people go where they feel like they can trust where their money goes, and so I see a lot of great potential in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much.
In the back there, with the mic. Yes.
Hello, my name is Maria. I'm a student here at NYU Abu Dhabi studying policy. And thank you so much for this conversation. It was very enlightening in a lot of ways. So for a long time, it has been my intention to pursuing a career in like international relations, in diplomacy. But taking into account everything that has been going on over the last several days, I've been like really rethinking my career choices over and over again. So my question for you is, how do the prospects to work in diplomacy and international relations look for someone, well, from Russia, or for someone from a, how do I put it mildly, a controversial country for that matter? It's a tough one, I know.
Thank you for your
Thank you for
honesty.
saying that, and don't take it personally. You are already, I could tell you're a lovely human being. So, and the world is changing, and it will change again. And before you graduate, there'll be something different. But the world actually needs more diplomacy now than ever, because you know, war is not the solution. And women in diplomacy and women in peacemaking, the more women you have in diplomacy and peacemaking, the more peaceful world that you have. So don't give up your hopes and your dreams. Even if you don't want to go back to your home country and work for your own government for whatever reasons, this neighborhood here in Abu Dhabi, there's over 100 embassies here, and you know, our embassies are filled with a very diverse population. Of our 100 staff in Abu Dhabi, only 25 are diplomats. We have a lot of Canadians, expats working in our organization. We have a lot of people from a lot of different countries. So opportunities are available in embassies, but they're also available in think tanks and in trade organizations and in legal areas for negotiation. So don't give up your dream.
Thank you.
And it's a very hard time for a lot of people right now, and I thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Maria, as you've heard, international relations is a very, very, very big tent, and a wide open one, and the very fact that you asked the question the way you did and your thoughtfulness showed your aptitude for working in that sphere. Just, yeah, I never thought of myself as a diplomat. I'm not very diplomatic either, just like you. I've learned my filters, but John Sexton, one of the founders of New York University Abu Dhabi, when he first sent me out here to work on this mutual education project between the UAE, Abu Dhabi, this forward-looking emirate, and then this university that under his leadership was also very visionary and forward-looking, you know John well as well. He used to call me the ambassador plenipotentiary. I knew that word.
Good one.
He didn't call me extraordinary,
Okay.
but he did call me
But you are, though.
plenipotentiary. So there was
you
a
are
sense that there
extraordinary.
was, I mean, this too is a diplomatic job in some way, the one that I have.
Yeah.
Who else has questions? I think, did you want to? Yeah, why don't you? come to the front. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Breki. I'm a senior in NYID. I just want to, of course, thank you so much for everything you've told us. It's been really inspiring. And I wanted to, get a bit more into, the Invest in Canada, because, my capstone projects is basically about, venture capitalism and, trying to have, see how foreign investment affects venture capitalism. So I was wondering, how is Invest in Canada, interested in, for example, investing in early stage or even, let's say, late stage venture capitalism? Because there is a lack of, late stage, foreign direct investment. So I was wondering, what's your take on that?
So typically FDI is attracting investment to Canada. And traditionally it's greenfield. So I want to take your company and open it up in Canada. Now the UAE doesn't have a lot of large private sector companies that are not already somewhere else. So you'll have the Googles and the Microsofts, but we would normally address them through their headquarters country. But the area that is most interesting to us with the UAE is the sovereign wealth funds. And because sovereign wealth funds are looking to make acquisitions, they're looking for mergers, and they're also interested, some of them have investment venture capital arms, and they're also interested in making co-investments in venture. So it's very unique here in the UAE that our approach is really around private and sovereign wealth, and also on the venture side. But again, it's money from the UAE that we want to bring to Canada to start up businesses in Canada. That's the whole point of FDI. CDIA, Canadian Direct Investment Abroad, is us helping Canadian companies who want to grow. And Canada is a small country, we're a very small market. Our companies have to go international in order to succeed. In fact, we're doing a session next week called Born Global, because Canadian companies are actually born global. You can't be a domestic company, you only have 36 million people. So we encourage them to invest abroad, and in that way we would be looking possibly at some point to partner them with venture or different kinds of funds to accelerate their businesses. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of questions on this side, please. I see the two of you too. We'll try to get to as many as we can. As quickly as briefly as you can answer your question, the better.
Hi, my name is Jackie. I'm actually Canadian.
Yes! My sister's name is Jackie, and she's Canadian too. So we have so much in common already.
Wow. Beautiful. I wanted to ask, I'm studying public policy, but I find I have a lot of strong opinions, and I'm wondering, as a diplomat, do you ever find yourself, kind of stomping over your personal goals? Do you find the balance of authenticity and kind of promoting policy goals hard to balance?
Well, I'm pretty lucky. I work for one of the best countries in the world. So I have to say that normally I'm pretty well aligned with the values of my country's brand, my country's goals. So I can't really even think of a time where I was really misaligned. So if you want to work for Canada, well, actually, sorry, you might have totally different views than I do, so that's not actually true. So I guess you want to align yourself with a country or an entity that aligns with your values, because otherwise you're not going to have fun. And that's why I'm going back to, in terms of getting a job based on skills, but it's also something that aligns with your values. And my values happen to align very closely to my country's values. And in fact, I always knew I wanted to be in the public service. I knew that I never wanted to work for money, like in business. I wanted to work to make an impact in the public. That's why I wanted to be a criminal psychologist. I wanted to help people. And so very much my values have aligned with what I've done throughout my whole career, whether it was representing my country or not. So I would say whatever it is you choose to do, it has to be aligned with your values. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable. You're not going to be able to do it.
Thank you.
Striped shirt and your neighbor, in order, the two of
Okay.
you. Good.
Thank you for your conversation. It's very enlightening. My name's Anush. I'm from Pakistan. I have a very personal question for you. So if you get a bit uncomfortable, you can choose not to answer it. But you mentioned that you had to move around a lot. Like, so you were in Dallas, and then you had to, from there you came over here. Of course, that would have an impact on your family as well. And I want to know, like, what is that sort of like challenge for you in your career? How do your family support you, and what are the like familiar problems that you get? Because obviously, once you get older, you will have a significant other, you will have perhaps kids and stuff like that.
Right.
So when you're pursuing this career, what is something you need to be prepared for in terms of that?
Good question. So they don't give you a lot of training on that either. But the Foreign Service is not actually posting individuals, they're actually posting families. And I traveled with my two sons, who were 3 and 6 when we went to Texas, and my husband at the time. Hint. And I'll just talk about my kids. He's a lovely man, and I will talk about him because he actually basically gave up his career to travel the world with us. So it does take an incredible spouse, because there's a lot of sacrifices that families have to make. So starting with your partner, when you get posted every 2 or 3 or 4 years, you have to be with a partner who can either cultivate something for themselves or cultivate a life around you and the family. And I was very fortunate to have a partner that allowed me to do that. And you can't do that alone. Like, if you can't take someone kicking and screaming with you, it's just not going to work. The second thing with the kids is you're always trying to do things as in the best interests of your children. And I always looked at it as a gift. I said I gave my kids 2 gifts. One of them was language. I forced them to go to French language school, to the lycée, because I learned French as a second language late in life, and I had never been able to master it. And I know that when you learn second language when you're young, it allows you to learn 3, 4, 5, and my kids are multilingual. So I had them go to lycée. That was the first gift, and the second gift I gave them was the gift of moving. And even though the 4 postings that they were on with me, Dallas, Miami, Los Angeles, Denver, were not very foreign per se, they were very different experiences, and they required them to cultivate a skill set that they rely on today, which is a skill set around relationships, resilience. And the other thing is, they, despite having only that US experience, they did go to international school, so all of their friends are from somewhere else. They were able to cultivate a worldview that you cannot get when you're growing up in the same place that you've lived your entire life, where you only see the kids in the schoolyard who look and sound exactly like you. So I think for me, those were the gifts that I gave them. Now, they would argue that maybe we moved around too much, and I'll have to say there was one posting where it wasn't beneficial to one of my sons, but as I lament on that and I talk to my other Foreign Service colleagues, they're like, your kids could have been screwed up if you left them in Ottawa. So they turned out great though. One's an engineer, one's graduated from business school, they're 24 and they're 26, and they were very resilient during COVID, and they're very successful. And generally speaking, I think it was an extremely, extremely positive experience for the whole family. But you have to be careful in what you choose and when.
Hi, Ambassador. My name is Arushi. I'm from India. So since you worked in the US, I have a question with regards to the NAFTA agreement. So when the dissolution of NAFTA actually occurred, like many considered Mexico and Canada to, be in very gray waters because, like the MFN principle of the World Trade Organization would actually kick in, would actually, you know, sort of succumb the foreign direct investment.
Trade policy expert. She's already talking over my head. No, keep going.
I'm
No,
so
keep going.
sorry.
No, keep going.
Serious economics and business and society.
Yeah, no, honestly, just
Okay.
trade policy, not my expertise. Yes, but yes, NAFTA.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Okay.
there was a lot of threat to like FDI in Canada.
Right.
But then it was replaced with the USMCA, right? So how do you think that this change actually affected Canada? Was it for
Right.
the better, and how did Canada cope up with it?
Great, good question. I actually know the answer to it. But I'm not a trade policy expert. That's not an area that I'm very good at. So NAFTA was in place for 25 years, I believe. So North American Free Trade Agreement, which allowed for the movement, basically almost tariff-free of goods between the three countries. And that agreement and our very close trading relationship, so up until maybe a few years ago, US is Canada's largest market, and Mexico, the US is probably Mexico's largest market. So the agreement bound us together, and they created supply chains that were integrated. So when a car is built in North America, some of it is made in Mexico, and the parts come to Windsor, Ontario, and then they go to Detroit, and then that car crosses that border about 10 or 15 times before it's actually ends up somewhere. It could be like Prince Edward Island, Ontario, and Prince Edward Island is its own province, and sold in Canada. So what we always knew was that the supply chains couldn't be disrupted because they're just so integrated. None of us would be able to make things without the other. You can't make houses if you don't have softwood from Canada. You can't make cars if you don't have skill from Canada. You can't make cars if you don't have workers in Mexico. So it was a dramatic impact, but in the end, all it really did was upgrade the agreement to allow for the modernization of it. So when we first negotiated NAFTA, we didn't have the interwebs, so we didn't have really good IP policies, and it also allowed us to go back and look at inclusive trade, like what is the impact on women and minorities and stuff like that. So in the end, I think it was sort of much ado about nothing. And it's actually left us with a stronger NAFTA. But despite that, and throughout my time in the US, there are trade irritants that happen between our three countries all the time, primarily in Canada's case with the US, where we're always going to the World Trade Organization to try to regulate the same things all the time. But yeah, otherwise, we're the friendly neighbor to the north. It's our #1 export market, so it's very important. And actually, 30 of the US states count Canada as their #1 export market, so we're together.
We have time for one more question, not on economic policy. I'm going to go to the back. Sorry I did that row, it's still random, but why don't you come forward?
And you could ask about economic policy if you want.
Okay, economic policy is okay.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Mariella, and I'm also Canadian.
Yes.
And I just had a lighter question.
Good.
What do you want the UAE to know about Canada, and what do you want Canadians to know about the UAE?
Wow, that's such a great question and a great ending question. So I want the UAE to know that Canada is a reliable partner, that we are very much aligned with the interests of the UAE around women, around peace, around security, and we want to work together with them. We think that we bring a lot of unique opportunities that we could bring if we had a partnership, and we think we can learn a lot from the UAE too, in terms of innovation and some of the things that UAE does. What I want Canada to know about the UAE is that it actually is a very open, tolerant, progressive society. That women are at the forefront of that society. That it's a very open, welcoming society. It's a very educated society. People don't realize You can just tell by the proportion of students in this room that, you know, women are so much more highly educated than their male counterparts. Okay, I'm going to take that back, guys. Sorry. Women graduate
It's
at
been
a
a long
higher
day.
women graduate at a higher rate than their male counterparts. They attend post-secondary education in the higher. So help. Didn't mean to ruin this.
The Emirati men are taking this in very good stride.
Okay, good.
I want to say. I see them laughing at that.
And that they should come and visit. They should come and visit because they should see it from for themselves. Because they have a certain mythology about the country that, first of all, they're not going to believe the Emiratis because they're going to believe the Emiratis are just making that up. And then if I try to tell them, they might believe me, but then they'll think that I may be making it up or I might be brainwashed. So I think come and experience the UAE and see it for yourself. And I don't know anyone who has come here and not been like amazed by what they've seen. Especially the Jewish communities that have been coming through here recently, they cannot believe it. So I think there's so many opportunities for partnership between our two countries. I think there's so many values that align us. And I want to do some great things together. So thank you for that question. And thank you all for your time and your curiosity and your patience and for coming to the site. And thank you to Mariette for thinking I was worthy of one of your esteemed roundtables and for honoring the Canada Pavilion with your first roadshow. And I hope it's one of many. And thank you very much, Mariette.
Thank you very much, community of Emirates Abu Dhabi, joined here with Canada, interwoven with Canada, and thank you, Ambassador Grossman. One more time, Ambassador Grossman. Great, great.